Welcome to the Radiant Vista. I'm Mark Johnson and this is a video tutorial. Today's tutorial is inspired by a gentleman by the name of Sridhar Reddy, and he sent me an email stating that he's been to a website called photo.net and he found several images from photographers/artists on that website that have kind of a surreal painterly look. If you take a look at the image that's in front of us right now, this shot is very high key, it's graphic, and it does have that surreal, painterly, nostalgic feel to it, and it's achieved via numerous Photoshop techniques. So I'm going to show you some of those techniques in this video tutorial, and I also want to note that a lot of this is achieved by the original photograph. When the original photograph is taken, it looks like it was taken with some beautiful clouds that are bright behind a subject that is much darker in silhouette. I'll show you another image in a moment, and I imagine some of that is just a result of the way the image is originally captured. So I'm going to open up an image that I have that is kind of along these lines and try to work with that image. This look kind of reminds me of the look of Maggie Taylor's compositing work. She has a book out, a tremendous book called Landscape of Dreams, and in Landscape of Dreams she addresses some of the compositing that she does to create this style of look, and it's so beautiful. It takes quite a long time to really achieve this look, but I'm going to show you some of the secrets that are behind it in this tutorial. You can see this image right here. Let me show you another one that is wonderful and inspiring. That image right there is really high key lighting, super contrast, and yet you get a little bit of the red that's coming out in the trees right here, and you have this sort of textured look back here in the sky area that really adds a painterly look to this image. So we're going to open up an image here that has kind of a similar look to those other images. Obviously it's not quite the same. I didn't have a chance to go out and take a photograph of this nature, but I think this will be something that we can work with. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by driving this image to a black and white, and then we're going to bring back a little bit of color. This was shot in Zion National Park, and I shot silhouettes of these trees, and then you have this tower in the background with wonderful light hitting it. So what we're going to attempt to achieve here is we're going to drain the color out of this scene, but I'm going to leave a little bit of color in the tower. Then I'm going to try and replace this blue sky with something that's a little more dramatic. So I'm going to take some clouds from one of my cloud files, and I'm going to put some more dramatic looking clouds in there. I'm not going to be able to get anything quite as dramatic as what we see right here, but we'll work along those lines. And then we're going to generate a texture that will add some sort of painterly or rough effect to this image. So we're actually going to generate that from scratch using Photoshop. So let's go through the steps on this one. Let's start by draining most of the color out of this image, and we're going to do that by using the channel mixer. So I'm going to come up here under layer and choose new adjustment layer, channel mixer, and I'm going to call this one BW for black and white main image, and I'm going to leave the mode set to normal and press OK. And in the channel mixer dialog I'm going to check the box that says monochrome, and I can play around with the red, green, and blue sliders here to achieve a nice look in the image. And I'm looking for something that's pretty high key, fairly dramatic, and whether or not I get exactly what I want will be determined by how the new clouds and the new texture blend in with this existing image. But let's go with that right there as a good starting point. Alright, I'll click OK. So there's my channel mixer driving the image to black and white or to grayscale. If I want to bring back a little bit of the color in this tower right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the brush tool, make sure that black is my foreground color, and then I'm going to paint with a reduced opacity. If I paint with 100%, what happens is wherever I paint, I'm bringing back full color. But I just want to bring back a hint of the red that's in that tower. So I'll paint with 25% opacity. I pressed 2.5 on my keypad, and that set the brush tool opacity to 25%. I'm going to zoom it up just a little bit here so I can see what I'm doing a bit better. And I'm going to paint with a soft brush on that tower, and I'm just going to let a little bit of color leak through there. And I don't want it all to come through, just hints or accents of the color are going to come through. If you look at the mask, here's what it looks like. I hit that with 25% black, and sometimes I clicked more than once. And each time I did that, I painted a hole through this channel mixer and revealed the original color of that tower below. Next thing that I'm going to do here is bring in the sky. So I've already got an image here picked out. I keep a sky file. I actually, when I see an interesting sky, I shoot just the sky, and I store all of those in my sky file so that I can use them for instances just like this where we're doing compositing work. So here's my sky image, and I want to take this whole sky over into that other scene. So I'll choose Select All, and then Edit Copy. I'll go back to my other image, and I'm going to choose Edit Paste. And now it's pasted in quite a bit larger than the original scene, so I need to transform it. I need to scale it so that it's smaller. So I'm going to choose Edit Transform Scale. And if you can't see the outside of your bounding box when you do this, and this is going to kind of mess things up here in this video tutorial limited window space that I have, but you can hold down Apple or Control and press the 0 key, and let's see what happens. Yeah, sure enough, it took me way out of the scene, so I'm going to go back to, let's see, let's get out of transform for a moment. I'm going to go back to my original size. This is going to take a moment. Alright, there we are, back to our original size, and I'm going to go back into Edit Transform Scale, and I am just going to grab this corner. If I want to scale proportionately, I hold down Shift and drag that corner. Actually, it looks like I need to shrink my image more. I'm just going to press Return or Enter to finish the transformation. I actually have to shrink my image here. Things really went haywire on me when I tried that that effect. Let's see about this. There we go. Okay. Now, let me use the Move tool here and move this sky around. Basically just trying to cover up the old sky there, and that's pretty good size for doing that. So again, just to reiterate that because I kind of got off track. Edit, Transform Scale. Hold down the Shift key and drag a corner if you want to constrain the proportions. When you're done transforming, press Return or Enter, and if you're in a fix like I was for a moment there, hit the Escape key. Now what I want to do is I want to drive these clouds. Actually, do I want these to be black and white? Yes, I think I want to drive these clouds to black and white, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right off the bat here, and I'll do that with a channel mixer. But what I'm going to do differently is I'm going to choose Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer, and I want to essentially link this channel mixer layer with the cloud layer, the sky layer that you see right there. I want it to only affect the sky layer and not bleed down and affect anything else below this layer. So I'm going to check the box that says Use Previous Layer to create clipping mask. And this box allows me to essentially clip or link the channel mixer layer into only the visible pixels on this sky layer. I'll press OK, and in the channel mixer dialog I'll click monochrome, and once again I'm going to play around here to get some kind of dramatic looking clouds. I'm going with some high key or high contrast look here, and I'll click OK. Now I need those clouds to show up just in the sky region of this image. So I've got to find a way to blend them in there, and because I have a nice silhouette right here, I'm going to try some of the blending modes and see if I can get really lucky. We'll see what happens. So with the sky layer active again, out of the channel mixer layer, back into the sky layer, I'm going to try some of these blending modes. So if I go up here to where it says normal and pull down and try on some of these different modes, let's see. Looking for one that's going to blend it in nicely, and I am just whipping through here. That's interesting what overlay does. I kind of like that. How about vivid light's very interesting. So is hard light. I found the group of blending modes here that are going to work best. It's a real toss-up between an overlay or a hard light, although hard light's not really illuminating it very well down there. Vivid light, linear light. Any one of these is going to work. Let's try, let's see here. Let's try the hard light and see how that works out. Alright, so hard light is beautiful up in here, but it's not really blending well there. So I need to eliminate it from these other areas. And in order to do that, I'm going to try something beyond the blending modes here. I'm going to try the advanced blending sliders. To get to the advanced blending sliders, you can do this multiple ways. One way is you can choose layer style blending options, and that will work. Or you can just double click in this empty space here next to our sky layer. So I'll double click there, and it brings up this monstrous layer style dialog box, and I'm only going to show you part of it. The part that I am concerned with is the sliders you see right down here. These sliders, this top group that says this layer, that allows me to essentially hide pixels on the active layer, on the sky layer, based upon their tonal value. So this would eliminate the shadow portion of the top layer, and this would eliminate pixels in the highlight portion of the top layer. I don't want to do that. I want to punch through these dark pixels that you see right here from the underlying layer. So I'm going to come down here to this slider, and notice that the moment I move that in, it starts to punch through those black pixels from the underlying layer. It punches them through so that they're essentially hiding the pale pixels of the clouds up there. The only issue with that is you'll notice that it looks kind of like the edges are torn when I do that. So what I do is I punch through as much as I can before I start creating a really torn look, and then I click the Option key, that'd be Alt on a PC, and I split this little delta in two. So I click on the right side and I drag that inward, and I get a much cleaner transition when I do that. So I've split that box or that delta in two by holding down Option or Alt, and that gives me a much smoother transition, something that doesn't look like a torn edge. Here's my preview switch. You can't see that, so here's my preview switch. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to press OK, and you can see now that we've got a pretty nice blend going on between the new sky and the old one. I'm going to turn the eyeball off next to this layer, and you can see some of the clouds are overlapping the tower here, so I'm going to add a mask to the cloud layer by clicking on Add Layer Mask. And I'm going to use the brush tool and the color black at 100% opacity, so I'm going to type 100, and I'm going to paint right here on top of the tower to eliminate those clouds from that area. Also, if I wanted to add more contrast into those clouds, I could add a curves adjustment layer and tweak the contrast, make it even more bright in the background. I'm not sure if I want to do that or not. I'll go ahead and give it a try here. Let's see what happens. I'm going to come up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves, and I haven't been naming things religiously here, but I'll just say Higher Contrast Clouds, and I will change the mode to luminosity, so I'm only affecting brightness and contrast, although technically it doesn't matter here because there's no saturation to be affected. And I'm going to use previous layer to create clipping mask, or in other words, I'm going to clip this adjustment into just the cloud layer and not let it leak down to my background layer. If I want to add contrast, I can just do my traditional S-curve here, like what you see there. And that's brightening the highlights with detail, and it's darkening here the shadows with detail. And I'll click OK. Alright, we're moving along here. Things are looking a lot better. Now I need to tone those clouds, or the whole sky actually. So if I want to tone it, there are several ways to do that in Photoshop. I'll show you one or two right now. One of the easiest ways to tone something is to choose Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue Saturation. And here what I'm doing is I'm toning the sky, so I'll name this Toning Sky. And once again, use previous layer to create clipping mask, because otherwise I'm going to end up toning the whole image, and I just want to add a tone into the sky. Press OK, and in the Hue Saturation dialog box, the key to toning something is to check Colorize. Now obviously this is not the tone I'm after, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the hue slider until I get a tone that I want. You can see you can go through the full spectrum when you're doing this. I kind of like some of the things in the blue and cyan area, but we're going to go with a more traditional sepia tone. And I can pull the saturation slider to make that toning more intense if I go to the right, or less intense if I go left. And I can even pull the lightness slider, and that has an impact on how the toning works out as well. I'll click OK, and it's looking pretty good. One interesting thing I'm noticing is that I have a little bit of a halo around the tower down there because of this mask, but we're not going to worry about that right now. The other way you could tone this, let me turn off the eyeball next to this toning sky layer for just a second, would be to add a solid color layer and change the blending mode. So I could choose Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and let's see, I don't get solid color from this particular pull down. I'm going to have to come to the yin yang symbol at the base of the layers palette here and click and choose solid color. And I'll pick a nice brown tone. So I'm pulling the hue slider here, and I'll find something that's a good rich brown tone. Perhaps something like, I'm almost looking for a chocolate. And I can't get exactly what I want without boring you to death, so I'm going to click OK. Now I can change the blending mode of that layer right up here, and different blending modes. One's like soft light. Actually, soft light's always pretty solid, and it worked very well right off the bat. Soft light really did a nice job of blending that brown tone into the underlying sky. Let's compare that with this one. Two completely different looks, depends on what you're after. I'm going to go with this solid color brown layer and soft light blending mode. I'm going to go with that one for now. Now in our next step, let's come up with some sort of texture. And this is something that could come from numerous places. For instance, you could scan an old painting, or you could rough up a piece of paper in some manner. You could sketch on it with pencil, or just beat it up, drag it around on the floor or on the pavement or something, and beat it up and create a look, and then you could scan that paper and use that as a texture. If I'm working exclusively within Photoshop, there's a spot where I can go and I can add a texture. So let's see, I don't think that's available. If I choose Layer, New Adjustment Layer, no, it's not available there, so I have to come back down to this spot where I create fill or adjustment layers, and I'll click on that and I'll choose Pattern. And in the Pattern Fill dialog box, if I click on, and I'm going to have to move this up, if I click on this spot right here, I can see the available patterns. And if you don't see a pattern you like, you can always click right here and choose Load Patterns, and that's going to take you into a load dialog, and there are a whole bunch of patterns available to you through Photoshop. I want the nature patterns, and I loaded those when I was taking a look at this earlier. So the nature patterns exist down here, and I'm looking for a very fine pattern, so I'm going to go with this one that you see right there. A super fine pattern right there with lots of tiny little dots, and I'm going to press OK. Now I want that pattern to first of all be in black and white, and then I need to blend it in with the existing picture below. So to drive it to black and white, you guessed it, we're going to use the channel mixer. So I'll choose Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer, and I'll call this black and white pattern. And I'm going to use the previous layer to create clipping mask. That way I'm sure that I'm linking it just into the texture layer, and it's not going to bleed down to any other layers, although this is a fully opaque layer right now, so there's some question as to whether or not that would bleed down. I just don't know. I'm going to click OK, and in the channel mixer I'll check the monochrome box, and once again I could play around with this to create a little bit more of a high key or high contrast look. Click OK. Now if I want that to blend with what's below, once again I'm going to play around with the blending modes. You can see how useful these are when it comes to compositing work like this. So I'm going to go up where it says normal and slide down, and I'll try a variety of these. I find that darken, multiply, lighten, screen, overlay, soft light, and hard light are really good ones to try. So let's try those. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let me undo that. I am still working on the channel mixer layer. I'm trying to blend this texture layer or this pattern layer with what's below, so I don't want to be working on the channel mixer. Now let's try this. Darken. You can see that that just blended those tiny little dots into the light areas. Multiply. Multiply is interesting but still not working for me. Lighten does nothing, so neither is screen. Let's try overlay. Overlay is definitely more in line with what I want, and so is soft light. Hard light's not so good. I like overlay and I like soft light here, but overlay is the best, I think. Now I love the texture that's in there, but it may be too intense and it's also too uniform. I'm seeing it all across the sky uniformly. So first of all, if I want to reduce the intensity across the whole sky, I can take and move the opacity slider for that layer to the left. And that takes down some of the intensity. Then if I want to just remove that texture from certain areas or reduce that texture in certain areas, I have a mask here. It's built in with every single filler adjustment layer that you find from this area right here, or by going Layer, New Adjustment Layer. So I'm going to go right to the mask, use the brush tool and the color black, and instead of painting with 100% opacity, which would completely eliminate this effect, I'm going to paint with maybe 25% opacity, and that way I can gradually pull it out of certain areas so it's not uniform across the whole sky, and it looks a little more random and a lot better. One other thing I could try to do here, and I don't think this will work in this image, but just to try and mess around with that pattern that we have there, I could try rasterizing this layer. I'd have to turn it into pixels in order to pull this off because I want to run a filter on it. But I could rasterize it by choosing Layer, Rasterize, Layer. That turns it into pixels instead of an editable fill or adjustment layer. And now I could choose Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. And in the Motion Blur dialog box, I can change the angle of the blur and the distance. And you know, that's actually kind of interesting. My first thoughts on it were wrong. It's kind of interesting looking like that. Let me zoom in a little closer so you can see it better. Here's what we had before, so I'm going to undo that. There's what we had before with the texture, and here's what we have when we've motion blurred it. So we rasterized that layer and motion blurred it. I don't know which one I like better. They're both kind of interesting. The other thing I could do here, because it's really bothering me that we have all this bright white down there, I'm going to try moving these clouds around. And to move them around without also moving the keyhole here or the mask, I have to unlink the two. Let me show you what happens if they're not unlinked. If I use the move tool and I move them around, you can see that I'm also moving, well, you can't see it well here, but I am moving the mask as well. So what I want to do is unlink the mask or the keyhole. And think of that as a keyhole, and when you look through it, you see these clouds. So I'm going to move these clouds independently behind that keyhole by unlinking the two and making sure that the layer thumbnail, the clouds layer, is active, not the mask. Now I'm going to move those clouds around. I could even transform them. My issue is I have too many bright clouds down there at the bottom that are bothering me. But you know what? I'd have to transform this to make it work. So I'm going to choose Edit, Transform Scale, and I'm just going to stretch my clouds out a little bit and press Return or Enter to make that so. And I can move them around, just trying to get the clouds so they're not so much around that area. And I can't quite achieve it here in this image, but you get the point. Anyway, so those are some techniques, some strategies that you can use to try and achieve the look of these images. Here you can see they left some of the existing color in there in the sky and in the foreground. And then in this other image, which is brilliant, they left color in the tree. And their toning here is absolutely gorgeous with this golden tone. And the way the texture's coming in, I assume that's from I don't know, a painting, an abstract painting or something that's kind of dropped in there. I'm not sure where they got that texture from. Could have been a scanned Polaroid transfer or something like that. And the texture's uneven and it does nice things in there. But anyway, hopefully that helps you out a little bit, and I wish you all a tremendous day. Don't forget that Craig and I would love to see you in a Radiant Vista workshop or a Radiant Vista weekend, and those workshops and weekends are posted on the Radiant Vista site under workshops, and we should have registration available on the site come March or April 1st. Have a great day.